Welcome to Wednesday night. John and Teresa are here, I'm sure. And our Haver Bradford small group is on tonight. So, hi, everybody. Fantastic to be here with you. Got a couple of announcements real quick. It seems like the cold weather is finally upon us and quite possibly to stay. Very sad. We actually had to turn the heat on yesterday, which hasn't happened in quite some time. Small group. It's more like a medium group and quickly becoming a large group. Nice. We like that. Pastor Brian Spicer in the house. 7:30. Remember, Bay State goes live with Brian Spicer, still in the Minor Prophets. And we're in Romans. Couple of quick announcements. Number one, if you adopted a college student back a couple months ago, please be sure to be checking in with them and sending them stuff. They're away at college. They could use some treats, and you are the people that can give them treats. If you did not adopt one and you would like to, there's nothing better than the only thing better than getting one care package is getting multiple care packages. So let me know either way. Hi, Leila. Speaking of college students, here is Emma is one of our college students. So I want to make sure Emma gets the goods from us. All right. Next week, there will be no live. I know, very sad. Take the Wednesday night off. Small group has the night off because they meet every other. Y'all can go out to dinner or go do whatever you'd like to do. No live here at 7 o'clock. You could still go to Brian Spicer's at 7:30 and Bay State's, but we will not be here. Every once in a while, AJ and I coordinate our days off, and next week is one of those weeks. So I will not be going live, but we'll be back in 2 weeks to finish up what we start talking about tonight. So no live Wednesday the 8th. That's all I have to say about that. All right, let's go to, there's all kinds of things we can do with StreamYard. Very exciting. You should see at Bay State, they do different backgrounds. I just always show you whatever office I happen to be in and whatever animals happen to be running around. But we could do backdrops. I try to express myself through my t-shirts and not. But yes, technology is a beautiful thing. A couple of lists said, so if you grew up in the 90s and you had friends that were well off, you probably saw a lot of these things. Or if you were well off, maybe you had these things. I'm not sure I agree all of them were in rich people's houses, but a lot of them. So here we go. Yeah, if you saw one of these, a couple of my friends had these in the house. Very cool. The automatic air hockey tables. It's very fancy. How about the VTech phone? So I had one of these. They were not that expensive. They were like $19.99. So I don't think this was a rich person's phone, but the caller ID and everything. What was cool was if you had non-dial-up internet, because or you had a separate line for your internet, because then you could be on the phone and be online at the same time. 90s kids are young. Nice. I don't feel young, but I appreciate it. Oh, and look at this. This is how you knew. These were video games back in the day, some of the more popular ones. Can you imagine paying $69.99 for Street Fighter 2? No, thank you. Well, that means it would be double that now. How about I had a Game Boy at one point. I did not have the Game Boy printer. Like, what do you even need a printer for the Game Boy for? That's just over the top. And then, if you remember, did not last very long, but the Virtual Boy, that's I did not have one of those. This is interesting. Computers from the 90s. So you look at that. For a computer for $2,500, had a 540 megabyte hard drive. That's not gig, that's megabyte. So pretty slow, not much storage. $2,500. Crazy. But if you had friends or that were wealthy, they probably had their own computer room, right? So we call that entire room just for their computer with the accoutrements. I like that. They probably had HBO. I never saw HBO when I was a kid. Never had it. Or maybe instead of the preview weekend for Disney Channel, they actually subscribed to it. Yeah, that was back in the day. Probably had all the VHS tapes with the plastic cases. That's fun. American Girl dolls or multiple with all the accessories to go with them. Yeah. Rich people stuff, I guess. This is not my list. I'm just reading you the list of things. Big time Lego sets. Never had one of these. The trampoline. That was always a sign back in the day. Only well-off people had the trampoline. If you were really well-off, you had one that was embedded in the ground. Actually seems like it's a little bit safer unless somebody goes through it, but there's less chance of bouncing on the trampoline and then falling off. So, if you went to a wealthy person's house, you probably saw a shower like this. Bathroom was separate, and then the shower had these really fancy glass tiles. Good times. Oh yeah, sound systems that linked up to every room. That's it. You're like, oh man, that's so cool. I can listen to stuff in the kitchen and the living room. Now we just bring our phones with us everywhere we go. Or if they're really well, oh, the Bose. That was it. That's how you know they made it. If they had the Bose sound system. Or they had one of these before you had the little Nokia flip phones. This was the one of the cell phone prototypes. Only if you were rich. I had a Walkman when I was younger. What I did not have was a Watchman. Little tiny TV. Really, I don't know that this served a huge purpose because you had to like tune it, and I don't know, but it was cool to have, I guess. How about this? The VCR rewinder, the tape. That's, remember, Be Kind, Rewind. And the deal was if you did it in the VCR, you would wear out the heads in the VCR. So if you had some extra money, you'd get a VCR tape rewinder. Prismacolor pencils, very fancy. And then nothing quite as fancy like Viennetta. I don't think these are actually that expensive, but Breyers you could see, but they look fancy. So yeah, some rich kid stuff from the 90s. Let's see. Oh, I said we had two lists, so we'll go with two. Oh yeah, we're doing it. This is unlucky people. So how about when you get a new couch and your kid also has a Sharpie that's in purple? That's a bit unlucky. What else? Oh yeah, when you receive your special order in the mail and it comes in one of those display boxes that can only be opened in store. It's like, oh, finally I got it. And it's, nope. Got to go back to the store. Oh, how about this? You get your steel-toed waterproof boots, and they crack within 2 hours of wearing them. Very sad. It's a bad day. Very unlucky. Hey, when you find out your neighbor's draining their pool into your yard, not nice. Let's not be those neighbors. Bridge Community Church does not condone that type of behavior. Oh yeah, your rent is $1,750. Then when you check your bank account, your available funds are less than that. Very sad. Not a great day. Hey, when you pay for a continental breakfast and you get that, no good. No good at all. Remember when long distance phone calls used to cost money? I guess maybe they still do now, but everybody makes them on their cell phones. And then you get a bill for $3,000 because you didn't know you were getting charged $3.50 a minute. Eesh, it's a lot of money. Oh, this was just sad. Is there an address I'm supposed to be at? This was a day after he was supposed to be working. Boss never talked to him. He and his boss. Maybe you should have texted yesterday. Buddy, you're the employer. You're supposed to inform your employees of where they should go. I shouldn't have to hound you for work. Now, here's a problem that we've talked about before. is that you really shouldn't have text conversations when there's any kind of anger or angst. Just call each other, because now the boss is upset. Hey, don't talk to me like that. And now he quits. So that was tough. Funny story about long distance. Oh man. Yeah. I feel like everybody from back in the day has a story about long distance. And usually what ends up happening is you call your phone company and you'd work out something, like it was a mistake or they need to fix it or adjust it or whatever. But it's very jarring to see that kind of charge on your phone bill. Waking up to all these scratches on your car. It's very sad. How about when you buy a new heater and then things just start coming out of it? That is horrific. I mean, it's better than having a bunch of spiders come out of it, but not much better than that. This is happening now on a lot of the point of service screens, or even when you take a taxi, it gives you a suggested tip and then it gives you different adjectives. Hey, this was for a $15 cab ride. If it was good, $5. $5? Great. 10. Wow. 20. Best service ever. This must have been the best cab ride ever if you're going to give $25 on a $15 ride. This is tough. I believe people should be tipped, but it's really tough, especially when you pick something up from a restaurant. Anyway, this is tough when you're doing laundry and your fiance's favorite stuffed animal is in the machine. It was very sad. Not their favorite stuffed animal anymore. Can't fix that. Crock pots are great because you plug it in the morning, you turn it on, and then you have a delicious meal waiting for you, except when the outlet doesn't work. And then you're right back where you started when you get home. Very sad. Or when your oven does work, but then the oven light bulb explodes right at the end of the cooking process, and you have a light bulb in your meal. That's no good. That makes me crazy. I'm guessing that has to do with the tipping. When your child throws their favorite toy down the drain pipe, bye. I feel like there's some easier ways, some technology ways to get things like this, but that looks like a long way down actually, and that drain pipe does not look clean. So then you throw it in the washing machine, and we all saw what happened when stuffed animals go in the washing machine. When your PC glass breaks, that's very sad. Looks like they shot through it with like a BB gun or something. This person woke up to their car covered in vegetable oil. First of all, I have so many questions about this. How did they know it was vegetable oil? Why would someone just dump vegetable oil? I don't know if it's a prank, like last night or the night before, people's houses were getting egged, or cars were getting egged. I'm just like, people still do that with the price of eggs. That's not very smart anyway. But number two, I guess people still do that, or they just take a jug of vegetable oil and drench your car with it, which is it's really tough to see, but it's getting pretty streaky there. I'm not sure how they knew it was vegetable oil, but that's a bad day. Hey, how about when your neighbors are moving and they leave their stuff on the stairs on the way to the laundry room for 2 days? Very annoying, very unlucky. Oh yeah, you get your cup of coffee in the morning and you're like, and there's a fly in it. Ew, that is gross. Hey, preschooler has a little tantrum. It looks like more than a little tantrum. It looks like a crime scene, really. But some little guy or girl was not happy. And then finally, when you don't like your neighbor's parking job, you just park them in. I'm trying to figure out what the first person did wrong. Like that, they look like they're parked in their space, and the truck was just angry at the world. So I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but I don't know. So that's tough. Anyway, there's sometimes we look at lists to remember the good old days. Sometimes we look at lists to say, hey, I'm glad that's not my life. And then we talk about Romans. So here we go. I know you're all excited to get back to Romans, so we are going to do that. And yeah, let's do it. So we basically got an overview last week. Today we're just going to start in verse 1 of chapter 1 and begin working our way through all 433 verses of this book, starting with the first 17. That's what we're going to focus on. Not all of them tonight, and then 2 weeks from now. So again, why Romans? We said last week that many of the greatest Christian leaders have considered it the most important theological book ever written. Martin Luther said it was the most important part of the New Testament, and that its central premise, justification by faith alone, was the doctrine on which the church rises and falls. And I said last week that the study of this book has been behind almost every major awakening in Christian history, even launching the Protestant Reformation. Today is Reformation Day. Celebrate. I've never preached through it. There's some really difficult passages to understand. This made me feel a little bit better. When Peter wrote a couple of his books, and he wrote Peter, 1 Peter 2, this is what he had to say. As he does, talking about Paul, in all of his letters, when he speaks in them of these matters, there are some things in them that are hard to understand, which the ignorant and unstable twist to their own destruction, as they do the other scriptures. Peter found himself like scratching his head over parts of Romans. So it's okay if you and I feel a little intimidated. I get this image of Peter sitting in a coffee shop in Jerusalem, reading parts of this book, and he's like, I don't understand what that means. And he couldn't just pick up a cell phone and text Paul and be like, bro, what did you mean by that? It was a lot longer method of communication back then. But because this book is so important, what I want to pledge to you is if you will engage with this study, by the time you're done, you will be a different person. I think that any time that we commit ourselves to engage with the Word of God and allow it to speak to us and change us, then we will actually be changed. So let's review a little bit, just real quickly. This is what we went over last week. Romans is a book about the gospel. It's the clearest, most in-depth look at the gospel in all of Scripture. But here's where a lot of people miss the boat. The book is written about the gospel for Christians. Let's look at chapter 1, verse 7 says, to all those in Rome, loved by God, called as saints. So some Christians miss the boat on this because they think the gospel is just for unbelievers. But Paul's going to show us that in the gospel, contained in the gospel, are all the resources we need to thrive in the Christian life. The gospel is not just the way you begin the Christian life, it's the way you grow in the Christian life. We said last week, it's not the diving board into Christianity, it's the pool. It's like a well where you just go deeper to get to the best water, right? And I didn't tell you this last week specifically. Paul has a very practical problem he's trying to address in this book. The reason he was writing the letter is because there was a clear line of division between the Jews and the Gentiles in the church at Rome. So the original church consisted of Jews and Gentiles, which already brought its own issues there because they had a ton of cultural differences. The Jews had a special diet, they had a code of laws, they had different political viewpoints. And then Emperor Claudius had ordered that all the Jews, Jewish Christians included, get out of Rome. And we read about that in Acts 18, 1 and 2. After 5 years, history tells us they were allowed to come back and they rejoined the church. But they, at the beginning, were in charge of the church, and now the Gentiles have been running it by themselves for a while at this point. You can imagine the drama that this created. There were all kinds of fireworks going on. So Paul is showing them how the gospel creates a new humanity that gives them the ability to overcome their differences, political, cultural, stylistic, etc. So we're going to start looking at these verses, and what we see in the first 17 verses, what I want you to look for is the man, the message, and the mission. The man, the message, mission. First, the man. Who was Paul? And he starts off by telling you, say, hey, I'm really glad you asked about that. Verse 1, Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, called as an apostle and set apart for the gospel of God. If you know anything about the Apostle Paul, so he was a former Pharisee. Pharisees were a sect of religious leaders in Judaism who were hyper devoted to the law. And in Philippians, Paul tells us he wasn't just any Pharisee, but he was a Pharisee of the Pharisees. He had trained under Gamaliel, one of the most sought after teachers of his day. I had to look that up, by the way. There's a bunch of different ways. It kind of looks like Gamaliel. So I had to listen to somebody on Google pronounce it for me, and it said Gamaliel. So we're going with that. Something like being, so Gamaliel was sort of like being a Rhodes Scholar of religion today. You didn't choose a teacher like Gamaliel. He chose you. He was like the Mr. Miyagi of Phariseeism. So Paul would have had most, if not all, the Hebrew scriptures memorized. He would have been proficient in multiple languages. And he was zealous not just to know the law, but to keep it. He said in Philippians, if anybody thinks you're good at keeping the law, humbly, I was better. He's like, I was really good at being good. He was so zealous, in fact, that he devoted himself to destroying Christians. We may see that as a bad thing, but Paul initially saw it as a good thing. He thought Christians were the enemies of God. And he was like, I was so zealous and focused that I was willing even to kill for his glory. He would literally do whatever it takes. Obviously, that wasn't the right thing to do. And that's why Jesus knocked him off his horse and got him going in the right direction. And that was part of his dilemma. He realized that his zeal for being good had led him to a really bad place. There are a lot of critics of the Bible and Christianity. You can listen to a guy like Bill Maher talk, or Sam Harris, or Richard Dawkins. Those three actually agree with the Apostle Paul on one thing, and it's this: religion can turn you into a really bad person. Religion caters to the worst parts of us: pride, self-centeredness, judgmentalism, self-righteousness, bigotry, which is why religious people are the absolute worst. Like, they're fearful, they're inherently competitive. Religion done to distinguish you from others or to set you apart is inherently selfish and leads to insecurity and selfishness and cruelty. That's religion. The one exception to that is the gospel, because the gospel teaches the opposite of religion. It teaches that God offers salvation not to those who earn it as a reward, but to those who are unworthy and receive that as a gift. So because of that, Paul says, I am now, we're still in verse 1, a servant. The Greek word for that is doulos. It's slave. It's lowest of the low. This is the opposite, complete opposite of what he had going on as a Pharisee. Think about this. As a Pharisee, his zeal for religion was aimed to elevate him above people. Now he sees his relationship to Jesus as the reason to lower himself and serve other people. As a Pharisee, when he encountered people who were sinful and had problems, he would be like, well, you're just getting what you deserve. If you were awesome like me, you wouldn't have these problems. Now he would say, yeah, I had a ton of problems too. Thank God it didn't stop Jesus from coming after me. As a Pharisee, when people would wrong him and treat him badly, he'd respond with vengeance, be like, I'm righteous, and if you treat me badly, I will pay you back. Now, Paul would say, I treated Jesus pretty badly too. Thank God he kept loving me. As a Pharisee, when Paul saw somebody in need, he'd say, what I have is mine. I earned it, and I don't owe it to anybody. Maybe throw him a carrot. Now he would say, thank God Jesus didn't keep what was his for himself, because if so, I'd be lost. So the gospel of grace produces in us a fundamentally different spirit than zealousness in religion does. Religion makes you proud and self-centered. The gospel makes you humble and generous. That's why we say all the time at Brooklyn, who are we trying to be in following Jesus? I want you to be people that are nice to each other, that are nice to people outside the church, and that are extravagantly generous, because the gospel in our lives makes us humble before God and before everybody else, and it makes us generous. We understand that any blessing we have has been given to us to be a blessing to other people. I heard a story about a pastor, very sad story. His pregnant wife and young child were involved in a terrible accident. An EMT worker fell asleep at the wheel, hit them head on, and killed his wife, her unborn child. The guy driving was being irresponsible. He had worked a 24-hour shift, and he really shouldn't have been driving. Well, this pastor showed up at the guy's sentencing. He was facing felony charges. He was facing hard time, and pleaded for more lenient sentence. He actually went to bat for this guy, and it began a friendship that lasted years, where they met over a couple of weeks. And this guy has basically become like one of the family. The story was carried years ago on the Today Show, and the pastor was asked, why would you do this? He said, that's what Jesus did for me. After I wronged him, he brought me close, and it just makes sense that I do this for others. Religion doesn't do that to you. but the gospel does. Gospel humbles you. You can even see it in Paul's name. Before he met Jesus, Paul went by the name Saul. You know who Saul was? He was the proud, victorious first Israelite king who stood head and shoulders above everyone. But now he went by Paul, which in Latin means little, which is fitting because that's how he now saw himself, small, but loved by a great God and a recipient of extravagant grace. The gospel transformed Saul the mighty into Paul the small. Has that transformation happened to you? There's a lot of people who are good at being good and all the nice things that go along with that. Guess what you get? Fearfulness, competitiveness, insecurity. Notice what he says next. He says, set apart for the gospel of God. So formerly, Paul had tried to distinguish himself through his talents, through his goodness. Now he wants to be known only for the gospel. He said, I've seen what I can do, and it wasn't good. So better to put Jesus on display than Paul. What do you want to be known for? How are you trying to set yourself apart? Here's what I know. You being impressed with me and my talents is not going to help you at all. Like Paul, when you see me on stage or on a screen, it's not all there is to me. I'm a lot less impressive the more you get to know me. Second, even if I was perfect, my example wouldn't help you. It would just crush you and discourage you. You'd think, well, I can never be perfect like I assume he is. So much better to use any platform that I have to make Jesus Christ famous than Russ Greenwood famous. Better to be honest about my struggles. Yes. Here you go. Of course, out of the woodwork comes Pastor Anthony Milas, Pastor Joe Guerin, and they're agreeing with the fact that I'm a lot less impressive the more you get to know me. Fantastic. Better to be honest about my struggles so I can point you to where I've found grace and help, because more than you need a role model to emulate, you need a savior to have hope in. The great missionary Jim Elliot said, we Christians are just a bunch of nobodies pointing to a great big somebody. What do you want people to know about you? You trying to be Saul the Amazing or Paul the Small? Hey, we're done with one verse. Only 432 verses to go in Romans. Here's the takeaway. Here's the challenge. And I started talking about this last week, but here it is. The gospel will always be paramount in our message and our mission. As your pastor, I want to keep you focused on the gospel because that's where the power of God is. I want to be relevant. We're going to do practical things, but learning Russ's 10 steps to conquering anxiety will not do you nearly as much good as standing in the wonder of the 10,000 steps Jesus took toward you. So it will characterize my messages. It'll always be what characterizes our mission. Nothing should get in the way. Nothing like politics, right? I don't want politics to ever get in the way. I have opinions and convictions politically, but I have an agenda way more important than that. And if this church ever becomes characterized by my political convictions, we lose opportunities to preach the gospel. I might be wrong about global warming or immigration or the helpfulness or unhelpfulness of a single-payer approach to healthcare. But in John chapter 6, Jesus feeds the 5,000, and they want to make him king because he could solve world hunger, right? Jesus retreats because they've gotten off focus. What could be more important than solving world hunger, right? He came back preaching the gospel. Nothing, not even world hunger, is more important than sharing the gospel. We don't want to get our cultural preferences get in the way of the gospel. We're not supposed to be a community of one type of person, of one ethnicity, from one cultural heritage, from one socioeconomic class. We're supposed to reach all kinds of people, which means each of us has to be willing to go along with things that may not be our preferences. We have to be willing to do that for the sake of the gospel. Bridging the gap between cultures and people is hard work, but the gospel is worth it. And what it means for you and I, two things. Paul's prayer for the Colossians in his letter to them was that the gospel grows deeper in them and wider through them in the world. And that's my prayer. So deeper in you, take notes as we go along. Like write down questions to study later or to discuss in your small group. Let those questions that you write down guide your conversations. Write down insights, jot down prayer requests. Start memorizing Romans for yourself. Team up with somebody that can hold you accountable. Read, study, meditate, collaborate over the word of God together. That's deeper in you. And then wider through in the world. Start thinking about a person that you can build a relationship with and share the gospel with. Ask the question, am I as eager to share the gospel and invite someone into the spiritual journey as Paul was? Am I as eager? And we said Paul was eager because he understood the power of the gospel to save him and change him and resurrect his life and turn him completely around. Same thing for us if we've experienced that. Let's see what we missed. Rich Pedrick. Rich and I have been friends for a long time, and now he lives in Tennessee, and I never get to see him, but he and I are boys. There's a song, Just a Nobody, trying to tell everybody about somebody who saved my soul. Very true. Encourage every one of you to make sure you're reading the Bible every day. Wrestle with what it says, let God work in you and through you. One of the easier things to do, there's a Bible app on almost everybody's phone. Use that. And we have, we're reading through the Bible in 3 years. It's a chapter a day for 3 years. That's all we're asking you to do. Very short, very quick. You can even have the app read it to you. Make sure you're in the Bible every day. Love you, buddy. All right. What a fantastic night. We're getting into Romans. Hope you all have a great rest of your week. Remember, no live next Wednesday. Sad, but then we're right back going through Thanksgiving. We'll see. Might be a special Thanksgiving night. We'll do something that Wednesday before Thanksgiving, but we're definitely back on the 15th. Most likely back on the 22nd, 29th, definitely. And then we're into December. So it's so great. More Romans coming in 2 weeks. All right. We're praying for you. We love you. Love to see you this Sunday. We continue the Exodus series. Jared is speaking. You get pumped for that. So it's going to be great. Jared speaking, and I'm supposed to pause after I say goodbye so that it doesn't cut off for anybody that started watching late. So bye, everyone. Have a great week. Now I'll awkwardly stare at you for like 5 more seconds so it doesn't get cut off.